Nunca había escuchado a un hombre expresarse así sobre sus emociones y sobre su camino terapéutico a la recuperación después de la adicción. De la adicción al juego, a la pornografía y al alcohol. Pero Mitchell nos comparte su historia de manera muy vulnerable. Él se dedica a acompañar a otros hombres a su camino de la recuperación. Vamos desde la infancia, de cómo fue este círculo vicioso que fue marcando la pauta de vergüenza a sí mismo, de quererse castigar y de tener que buscar escape en otros lugares. Sin echar culpas, pero tomando responsabilidad, Mitchell expone precisamente eso. ¿Cómo es que podemos empezar a tomar responsabilidad sobre nuestras vidas cuando nos encontramos en el hoyo más negro en el que nos podemos encontrar dentro de la adicción, dentro de esta vergüenza, de esta culpa, de haber hecho cosas que no son buenas para nosotros, pero no poder dejar de hacerlas? Él nos explica el por qué las hacemos y cómo es que nos podemos dirigir hacia un lugar mejor para nosotros mismos y como hombres, para nuestras familias, para nuestras esposas, para nuestras madres, para nuestros padres, pero más importante, para nosotros mismos. Para los que no me conocen aún, soy Cintia Luna, soy neuropsicóloga y soy la host de este espacio. Me apoyarías muchísimo si pudieras darle like, compartir y suscribirte al canal si es que el contenido de aquí resuena contigo, para que podamos seguir haciendo esto. La entrevista está en inglés, pero siempre van a poder encontrar los subtítulos o la traducción ya disponible en español. Pero sí les recomiendo que para eso la vean en YouTube, pero sin más que decir, los dejo con esta conversación y espero que les sirva tanto y que la disfruten tanto como yo lo hice. Nos vemos en el próximo episodio. Hi, Mitchell. Thank you so much for joining us today. I was very glad to find your page, and we are here to talk about an hour about life after addiction. So I want to start asking you a little bit of, in Mitchell words, what is addiction?
What is addiction? Addiction is based upon, well, the more of the deduced definition is you do something that you say you know is awful for you, yet you do it anyway. You have no boundaries around that. Addiction it's entirely based upon your environment. Addiction is your environment. And what we become attached to based upon the pain that we go through in our life that we think that we need, where in actuality, it's just taking the place in an artificial form of what we actually really need. It's the dupe. It's the false self clinging for life, because we think we need it for our existence. So it's like the true false reality. Yes. You know? Mm-hmm.
You said there are a couple of important points, which is it's your environment and it's something you do that you know it isn't right for you or it doesn't do you any good, but you still go ahead and do it. Mm-hmm. Which, in my definition, an action and a behavior like that can only create pain, but can also only come from that pain. And you touched upon that word. Can we define what is pain for you?
What is pain for me? For me, pain is not living up to my potential.
Okay.
Where, of course, you can look at pain from a physical standpoint, from an emotional standpoint. Pain really is something that you aren't able to process. Maybe you have questions around certain things, and it elicits like a charge. It elicits a conflict within you that you don't quite understand, and you don't really know how to find remedy and resolution. So it just kind of sits there, kind of stays, and you can either avoid it or you can go into it.
Yes. Pain is not living up to your potential. I think that is so individual to each person. So I would love to know, what is your potential, or what is this man that you aspire to be that was somehow blocked by addiction?
That's a great question. For me, it's about my connection to the Creator. It's about connection to the earth. It's about connection to our life around us and being absolutely aware of everything that is in our life that is for us. Because everything is for us. No matter if it's harmful or causes us pain, everything is a lesson. And so for me, my greatest potential is to always see the signs of God, always see the signs of the path that I'm on, and follow that via my intuition or my inner knowing. Being able to be in touch with that deeper part of myself, that spirituality, that you need your instincts. You need your instincts of where you are, where your feet are. Because life is, all the profound things are just very simple and added up over time, I feel. So for me, that's my greatest potential, is to have the awareness to be where my feet are and not want to be somewhere else,
Inevitably, there are certain things that are most stronger signs for each of us. I wonder if, as a father of a family and as a husband, those are the stronger signs that anchor you into wanting to be that full potential of a man that you are describing.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Yeah. When you have a son or a daughter or a wife, they are a direct mirror of you. Like, if you look at the creation story, man was created first, then women, and then children. And it talks about how man will have rule and dominion over the earth. Now that's taken out of context, where rule and dominion just means guiding. It means stewardship. It means fathering, right? It's your responsibility to be that man because everyone else is dependent upon you. And in a very layman's term example, say I wake up one day and I'm just in a pissy mood. The whole family is going to be in a pissy mood until I deal with my stuff. Everyone's going to follow my lead. You know what I mean? It's not from a sense of man is greater than woman or woman is greater than man. It's we all have this primary role, where women lead differently than men lead, and women absolutely lead, and they lead from the front via their intuition and their spiritual sense and their birth and their ability to already be initiated, right, by childbirth, by nature. So absolutely, being a father was the most important catalyst in my life to be that for which I already knew that I was within me.
What a beautiful answer. And the thing that I loved the most was the openness around, if I wake up in a shitty mood, the family's going to be in a shitty mood. Because that's 100% true. I think the father is such a strong, and I have such a respect for the anchors and the protectors of the family. Biologically, you guys are stronger. Biologically, you guys lead with force, and women lead with emotions and with the heart, and creating that security within the family for the children. And I think it's sensitive to think and to say that, yes, men and women are biologically different. That's why they also lead in different ways. But with so much respect to men, I do see the importance of them being anchored in the family and then protecting the family and protecting the spouse and creating a safe space for her to develop and for her to mother children. It's such an important aspect of letting go of things that do not contribute for her safety or the children's safety. And that's when we dive into addiction. You spoke, when we first met, you spoke about 3 different types of addiction, or 3 different avenues of that addiction in which it was fed, one of them being gambling, one of them being alcohol, and one of them being pornography. And I would love for you to talk a little bit of, how did you get into, first, let's go with gambling. When was the first time you interacted with that behavior, and when did it hit your brain? Oh my God, this is exciting, and this is something stimulated that I know it's not good for me, but I should keep engaging with it.
That's a great question. No one's ever asked me about the gambling piece in that way. because for me, the gambling piece has had the largest ripple effect that's played out in my life that has been the most harmful for me and my family, because it's all based around monetary, and we live in a monetary society of needing money for things. So the first time that I really encountered gambling, well, like I always had this, I always attached my value to money growing up. I didn't grow up extremely wealthy. My parents worked really hard to put me into school and to get where we are at. And yet I was surrounded in this environment that was totally different than how I felt. I went to a big private school, and I always lusted after everything that they had. So I would try to make money really quick. So I had that itch there. Like, let me try to just get a lot of money really quick, really fast, ever since my teens, you know. The actual act, probably like sports gambling, I would say probably like cryptocurrency in like 2018. So like not too long ago, like just over 10 years ago. I viewed it as like, okay, I can just make a lot of money really quick, and not really understanding like it's an asset that you invest in, and understanding investment principles and all those things that I have understood now. So I would dump all my money in and then like hit zero when I'm like in my 20s or so. So that's where I really started to understand and feel the pit of that feeling around the gambling issue. And that, like, I recently, right around the same time that I stopped using porn, that's when I stopped gambling. That was, you know, a couple of years ago. So it's followed me all into that part of my life, where through my story was a lot of the reason in our transition and our move from Nashville to Puerto Rico. Like, we had to go live with the in-laws. We had to go do all these things because I gambled a lot of our money away from my family that we had made in our chiropractic practice and all these things. Cause I thought like, oh, you know, I can get it back. I can get it back. You know, I had that itch there until I fully zoomed out and was like, okay, this is all connected. You know, I worked with a mentor for a whole year, and the basis of the mentorship wasn't even about that. And that's what I always would come to in all of my spiritual works, whether chiropractic or, you know, personal journey, or in my mentorship, was around my habits of gambling, pornography, and drinking. And for me, they're all connected to the one singular source. So, so it's all there, you know.
Yeah. Wow, what a packed response. I thank you so much for being that vulnerable. And a lot of people would hit zero. You know, a lot of people would hit zero and still not call it an addiction. What was that pivotal moment that for you was there an instance where the family, or was any experience where you noticed, I failed at delivering this, which was enough of a strong emotion to make you switch gears?
Mm-hmm. We were living with the in-laws, and this was like last January, and I had still had some patterns, you know, really surfing around, you know, gambling, around those things of that nature, that I was working through actively. As I was taking the mentorship, I was getting my own inventory, gathering my own data on my story. And I remember laying there in the ceiling, just like thinking to myself, like, man, I am responsible for all of this. I finally, I claimed responsibility for our situation. I stopped choosing to be a victim. I stopped choosing to blame everyone. And I was like, look, I'm not even going to blame myself. I'm just going to take responsibility for this pattern because it's for me in some sort of way. Like, God would not gift this thing to me if it wasn't for me to use. And so, you know, we had like negative $45 in our account. We had negative money, and I could not have felt better about my life. I felt so happy because I actually appreciated everything that I had where my feet were. I looked at my wife. I looked at my daughter. I looked at where we were staying, and I was like, I have everything I need. You know, I had food on the table at the time. And I was like, I'm complete with this way of living. and I'm going to accept this pattern as for me, and I'm going to use my unique abilities and skills of teaching to help men with this pattern. And then the next day we got our first client, like to the day. And I was like, okay, I understand now. I get it. I know my path, you know? So, well, what's the saying? Like, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. It's just like, I'm ready to GTFO. But not really GTFO, it's more GTFI. Like, I'm going to get the fuck in there. I'm going to, like, be in to myself and understand myself and really answer the question, why? Not why me, but, like, why? Why is this here for me? So that's where and that's the path I've been on since. And that was, a year or two ago.
What a powerful thing. There were a couple of things that I think it's quite powerful. First of all, taking responsibility, not blaming anyone and not blaming myself, but taking responsibility. And I think that is something very difficult, especially treating with addiction. And men think that taking responsibility might implicate taking the blame,
Exactly.
and there's so many different factors to someone's behavior. Specifically speaking, 90% of our behavior is implicit. It comes from our implicit memory system. So it would not be okay to say that something you harmed or something you did to harm someone is something you need to be blamed for, yet it's something you need to take responsibility for. Mm-hmm. And more powerfully, that question of, I didn't ask why me, but ask why. It's very important, because I think looking into the past and looking into previous behaviors, previous mindsets around those behaviors, gambling, alcohol, porn watching, I think it's important to understand where did they stem from. And my next question is regarding the past, regarding a little bit of a little you. What is it that normally when we see patterns of addiction, there is something that it's giving to you? As you said, this is something for me and it's giving me something that allows me to regulate something that I didn't have, or overly compensate for something that I didn't have. So my question directly is, what do you believe that those behaviors were compensating for?
That's a great question. Well, going back to talk about little me, you didn't mean to say it like that, but that's how I like to talk about it. It's like the little me, like 11, 12, the little me, because, just like the little you, it's all still there. My household was very stressful, and I always thought that it was centered around financial. And I learned, I believe it was in 2019 or 2020, just talking to my mom and my family, we're very forward with one another. We go, there's nothing we haven't discussed in our life. It's been very healing for all of us. And she's like, we weren't stressed about money. Your dad had a porn addiction. And I was like, interesting. So I remember at that time in my life, it was like I felt that I wanted and yearned for this connection with a man and to feel safe. Really, it was all centered around safety from another man. And, he was hardly there. He was at work or doing his thing. And so for me, that's what it gave me. It gave me a feeling of feeling in control, feeling safe. And it actually paired with the money piece too, because I grew up having a lot of fear around money, a fear around sexuality. So it was always intertwined with this aspect of fear and safety. And one of my triggers was always like fear around money. So then I would, go and look at a screen, which has a big part of it, the light from the screen. And then I would do my thing. And I would always feel so much shame, and we grew up in the church. And I feel like that has a connection too with how a lot of Western culture and religion is taught. just gives you more shame. So I would say the big primary thing was it gave me safety and a sense of being in control for a fleeting moment. And then I would be left with just myself again, sitting with myself and all those things. And I would then ignore it or repress it or do something else. So
very powerful what you're saying there. It gave me chills when you say what I was truly seeking was that connection with another man. That connection with the one that is the anchor and the protector and the lead, the example, you know? And of course, do you think, or do you recall, and I don't seem to do a leading question here, but with all due respect, do you notice internally this kind of outspaced attention from that male figure, your father in your family? Like,
what do you mean?
Yes, because you're saying what I was truly seeking was the attention or of another man. And I believe that as a little you, as you look up and you see your dad, and that's the best example you could ever have. So whether you
I know what you're asking. You're asking, since I didn't get it from my dad, was I looking at other men for that? Is that what you're kind of asking?
No, I'm asking whether that was something that lacked, whether that safety, that attention, that maybe was elsewhere. If there was a porn addiction.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That was the biggest thing lacking was that attention. And notice the way in which I'm saying it, it's without blame. It's just like, that's how it played out. And I spent so much of my life blaming my mom and dad for my life. And then I started to zoom out and be like, they're just people too. They just so happen to be my mother and father, So absolutely. And then, like, besides that, they would go to all my games. They would be there for me in different ways. Yet it's like it wasn't what I felt that was what I really needed. It's like I wasn't really understood, So they would try to do their best. And now I look at it from grace. I'm like, man, because now I know so much more context about my mom and dad and their upbringing and all this stuff. And yet in the moment, you're just like, I have a need and it's not being met. So then I'm going to take it upon myself with what I know, which is very, very, very little, based upon being a product of my environment. So,
especially because kids and teenagers are so absorbent to their environments, that's when our sensory system, our memory sensory system is quite active. So you're a sponge to your environment without really being able to make sense of it, because we have this other part of our brain, which is the hippocampus, that gives it meaning, and those two are not connected, yet you're absorbing all this information, but are unable biologically and neurologically unable to make sense of it. So it does make a lot of sense, and we're here not to blame parents but it's part of the story. It's part of the context. And I think it's important to recognize that something lacked, that something did happen without shift and blame, because I think parents, especially in this day and age, they feel enough shame and embarrassment for
Absolutely.
The more information that comes out about what is the environment the emotional environment that a child should develop in to be raised correctly. Now we're seeing all these parents being shameful, like ashamed of themselves and embarrassed because they're like, oh my God, but how could they know? It's not about blaming, as you said. And I think that is beautiful. It's about asking why, and also being curious, because that connects the family back in. As you say, we have discussed this, and it's not about blaming. It's about telling one story and telling in the ways one wasn't understood, without saying, you are to blame, rather saying, how can we reconnect now that I know that this is how I need to be loved?
Yes. Yes. Curiosity.
Yes. Which takes me to a very important topic of the conversation. It's emotions. I rarely see men show emotion or being able to articulate emotions. And I just want to know, where did you learn?
Life, no. What did I learn about emotions? I can thank my mom a lot for the ability to feel, right? I spent a lot of my time with her, and being a sponge and being a blueprint, being empathetic, being in that intuitive sense of just being able to know and feel and understand. So I can thank a lot of her for that. And I would say a lot of it is around my teaching that I received in chiropractic school from a mentor of mine, John, of looking at the body from an observer state and allowing you to just observe what it is that you're feeling. And what's funny is I experienced that in my late 20s, and now that's like a lot of what we teach our daughter, and a lot of what parents teach kids is like, I'm feeling blank, and they'll have like the picture with the emotion and that type of thing. So for me, it occurred very, much later in life, because I finally chose to feel my fear. I chose to feel my shame and my guilt and my grief and all of those lower level consciousness emotions, or states, you could call them, to work my way up, or in a non-linear sense, right? Because this is just, it's really non-linear. So really for that 4-year span of schooling, that container that I entered into, and then going into life and really just applying and doing my own work, and looking at simplifying the pornography addiction as it does relate to emotions around fear and anger and shame, those big three specifically, that I had to witness and observe in myself. So a lot of it is just self-experience, self-observation, practicing, and of course my wife being a beautiful mirror, who's always just spot on with what she's feeling and noticing.
That is really beautiful, and particularly I want to talk about shame. And I come from a Latin American culture, so this is the way that I perceive it, but please contradict me if that doesn't resonate with you. I believe that men have been imposed equally as women different roles. Like, you have to do all this, and the having to do something implies a responsibility they might have not asked for, and a lot of generations have been placing that big responsibility, especially in my culture, towards men, saying you're the provider, you're the headstrong, you are all this, without even asking if you wanted it or not, without giving you the option to say, oh, this is the life path for me, or this is not the life path for me. And whether you think that some of the shame that I think collectively men feel towards, as you say, sexuality and alcohol and other types of behavior could potentially come from this heavy responsibilities that were implicitly placed on them to be something.
Yes, and that gets into talking about really how we've evolved. We've evolved via this fear-shame dynamic. And Martin Yusick talks a lot about this in his work of, if you go back to tribal times, women experience fear, men experience shame. So from the simplest form, women experience fear that they're, vulnerable. So they need a strong, capable male in order to protect them. And when a man does not fulfill that, he will experience shame. That has now evolved into man experience shame when he doesn't perform well on the football field, or doesn't perform in his marriage, still, or work, or et cetera, et cetera. He doesn't fit the construct that you're talking about, that is placed upon him, this belief system that is placed upon him, and even the woman too. So that I think a lot of the constructs play into, religious construct, even educational system construct, play into these dogmatic ways of being able to control man for him to sit in his shame, where we have to traverse it. And how do you traverse shame? By talking about it, by giving it attention, right? Energy follows attention. So absolutely, that that speaks so well of just, if you look at how we've evolved, right? It's just like that. You know, I'm here in the island in Puerto Rico, and it's the same. Even on the mainland, it's very much similar as well.
Yes. Shame is such a big emotion, as you say, and totally, like, even logically, I'm a very factual person, but even logically, I can see the reasoning. I am anxious, you know, I'm a naturally anxious person, and I always retrieve to my partner to, you know, give that care and give, like, let me into your cell. And of course, I see that whenever I have a complaint or a requirement or said, oh, you could have done this better, and it's only a suggestion, he goes towards shame. He goes towards deep shame of it. He takes it as if it's his personality, and I just kind of have a problem with his whole identity. And I'm like, no, it's just about bettering and finding better attunement to how we can be of service to one another, and how we can keep on being loving to this relationship and protecting it. But yes, how do we stay with the shame even though we want to run away from it? And how do we navigate shame?
Well, if you look at the body, shame is rooted in the pelvis. The emotion of shame is in the root chakra system. I look at it from a couple different perspectives. Like, biologically, what do we know our bodies thrive off of? Light, literal sunlight. So for me, a lot of this traversing of shame has been literally getting myself in the sun naked. I've been getting sun on the darkest parts, the shadowy light parts of my body that I have hidden from the world. And I do it in a contained space. That has actually been a great release for me, to feel the empowerment of just being seen. So for me, shame, it goes from shame to shamelessness, which is just about display. So if you look at animals like the white-tailed buck deer or other animals that have a beautiful display, it was the thought that they would do that to mate. But it's actually done because they would just want to display themselves. So if you look at it that way, it's like, oh, I just have to just display me. And they're like, I may feel shame doing that because that's the point. That's how you get through it. You feel it and you act towards shamelessness of, I don't care what people think about me, and that. But you have to have an awareness first. You have to talk about it. And so I view it from that, like, psychological, biological lens, that because we are a mind, body, soul, we are our whole thing. So it's giving attention to all three of those things in order to traverse through that. Because for me, shame is the after effect. You know, like, it's the bottom. And what's really important I feel is anger. I feel like that's one of the most important misconceptions that men have, because shame is just another level of sadness. Shame is like, I'm sad. I am sad. Where guilt is like, I did something that made me feel sad. Shame is a deep level of sadness, where sadness can mean, in a conscious perspective, what do I need to say goodbye to? What do I need to say farewell to? How am I operating that I need to say goodbye? To get to anger. Because for me, man, with working with over 20 men, it's like they all have the same misconception of anger. And no one wants to use it because everyone's afraid they will lose control of anger. Because they didn't experience anger when they were kids. They experienced abuse, not anger. So there's a lot there.
Yeah, this is something that I see a lot, specifically in men, that there's this quote, I never get angry. I never get angry. I heard it multiple times. You know, I heard it multiple times. I heard it multiple times. I never get angry. And tell me a little bit about that. What do you think when you hear a man saying, I never get angry because there's no reason to be angry about, and, you know, you cannot dwell on the negative and we can all be Dalai Lamas for the rest of our life without anger?
Yeah, it sounds like toxic positivity for me, where I think there's a lot of that in this lack of men being rooted in who they are and where they are. So they fall into the, I'm going to be a really nice guy, kind of like a frivolity way of living, where I'm a good vibe, I'm always good vibes only, where for me, that's inflation. You're inflating yourself because you're unable to look at that thing that you want to get angry about. So for me, that's just deep level of repression. Because people don't understand it. People don't understand anger. And they view it as a negative thing where emotions aren't positive or negative. They just are. We have attached to these things a construct to where we avoid certain things because that's what we do. We're really smart. We're just like, that's a negative emotion. It's like, no. Like, it's not. It just is. It's just an emotion.
And I think in order to be kind to people that don't get angry, and it's possibly very repressed anger, perhaps they just don't know that they have permission to be angry, or they have permission to not like something and say it.
Yes.
But for those people, how can they start acknowledging, because so many of them are disconnected from their emotions and they don't even know that it's anger? How would you describe the sensation of anger? What are the symptoms, you know, that a man has repressed anger?
Anger is in the jaw, the throat, and the heart. And that's where it's stored. That's where it's held. Think excessive heat. Think fire, right? The fire of awareness. Where anger, you can translate it to just boundaries. Anger is about destruction. Yes, look at nature. Nature is such a beautiful symbolism of anger because nature is based in destruction. Right? Wildfire comes through, destroys all of the old, and what gets birthed? Deep, more rooted, green vegetation. Look here on the island, palm trees get hit by a hurricane. With each strong gust of wind, their roots root deeper. So we have to learn and start observing nature through our own lens of like, okay, if I have all this anger, where in my life have I not placed boundaries? What do I need to destroy that is not of service to me any longer? What boundaries do I need to lay?
How does a man start laying boundaries whenever they have gone a lifelong without establishing them?
Well, there's an internal boundary and an external boundary. You have to set your internal barometer first of yourself. It's, do I allow myself to go for the next treat, or do I allow myself to look at my phone when I want to feel stimulated? Do I have an inability to say no? That's the first place to start, is say no to things that you don't want to do, that aren't in alignment with what you want to do. Say no. Where we have been confused that we have to say yes, because if we say no, then that means that, we're not going to get invited again to the next thing, or whatever else that we believe, or that we're not nice if we say no. Where you look at children say no all the time. Children have great boundaries until they are constantly beaten and berated as far as their boundaries. They're forced upon by the bigger mood of the adult. So it's just simply in saying no. Like, no more. Like, no.
And also the importance of saying no to yourself. Saying no, being able to say no to what isn't nutritious for you, and being able to say yes to what is nutritious for you internally. Is that, am I reading that correctly, that you're saying that? And
yes.
executing that in the external. What is it that I want to say no that it isn't nutritious to me externally?
Yeah, like what is not of use for me? And even getting into like what we did at the first of this conversation is like we sat into a space. We sat into a meditative space that required an internal boundary from both of us to sit in that space. Right? We said no to coming out of it. Right? So you have to, I'm going to sit here and stay still no matter what I want to do, no matter what I want to check. I'm going to sit here and say no to everything else and be with myself. What is that? That's meditation. To observe everything else that's going on so you can have a deeper awareness of yourself. So if meditation is just saying no a lot,
saying no a lot. Yeah. Yes. There's a very good quote or a very good question that I tend finding myself asking to myself at the end of each week. Where did I say yes when I wanted to say no?
Wow. That's really powerful.
Where did I say yes that I wanted to say no? I'm probably the most hated person around in my circle, but it's the courage to be disliked, to say no,
yeah.
not anymore.
Yeah, no más.
No más, yes. I've heard you say pornography is horrible for us, but I would love for you to tell us why.
Pornography is horrible for us. Why? Well, it has no absolute use, and it feeds you the artificial reality that you're trying to exist in. It's completely artificial. It's not real. It is pixelated. It's controlled. It's a nice like big dose of something in a syringe that you can control and use at your own rate. It's awful for the brain. It's awful for the body. It messes with how we perceive our own reality completely. It takes away our instincts. It takes away your ability to feel, ability to love yourself, ability to be excited, to experience joy in life. It completely takes all of that away. And you become subservient to this thing that you think that you need.
Yes, definitely. We could see, especially now in adolescents and children, we can see that they're more and more exposed with time to pornographic content, even outside pornographic sites. Seeing the rise of online platform, we now see OnlyFans, where girls, teenager, young women, as you say, I can make money fast. I can make money fast. I can expose my body in the internet and call it private content, and people will pay for it. And we see that there is that stimulus and there is that, let's say, reward, because that is what sells nowadays, and that is what we've been bombarding people with. And I would love to know your take on, why do you think that we are seeing such a big race in the wanting to watch this type of content? Specifically speaking, OnlyFans, why has it become such a big platform? Even like now you hear about people that otherwise they would have stayed there, buried there, but now they're so viral that they're up in your face and you know who they are and you know what they do. But why do you think that is?
That's a great question. Well, if you look at the brain, the space for monetary gain and erotic imagery are at the same spot. Orbitofrontal nucleus and the frontal lobe. It's the exact same spot. One's on the front side, one's on the back side, and it's at the same spot. So OnlyFans has beautifully sculpted and crafted a platform that works, that's based upon our biology and how they can use our energy to fuel people's, inflated type of experience. Also, what plays a part into it is that it's technology. So anything that has technology, this phone, like I have a red screen on mine. This phone and any TV, any iPad, nowhere in nature does this type of light exist, ever, anywhere. Because this light that's on this phone, it's broken. It's light that's taken out of the context that is, white or blue, where light is a spectrum. So all technology plays into this. And you take light, you take monetary gain, and you take erotic imagery, that is a dopamine concoction that will distract man. Because we are wired for pleasure. We're also wired for a braking system against pleasure. And the more that you indulge, what do you do to your brakes? You're pushing the gas and you're pushing the brakes at the same time. So you are completely eroding your braking system. And so when you have kids that have a really underdeveloped ability to have boundaries and a really underdeveloped brain where everything is just amazing, they're going to go right for that and think that that is reality. So then they lift these people up because it's, they are this image, because we all have within us an archetypal need to lift something up, to view something as a mother or father archetype, as an energy, as a king or a queen of some sort. And so all of that plays into it, right? Psychologically, biologically, it's all in how the spirit interjects with those two pieces. And it's preying upon man's want to just feel and be loved and be with a woman that he can have a family with. It's taking his generative ability and his creative sense and his seed and his power. Because that's where man's power is. It's from our root. It's from our gut. That's how we lead. We lead from the bottom. So that's my big why around all of that.
But being with a woman that is loving and caring obviously comes at a cost. Comes at the cost of protection, comes at the cost of providing, comes at the cost of taking responsibility, as you say, asking why, and doing
Absolutely.
better each time. And it comes with all this cost, which instant pleasure seems to be way easier to obtain rather than this really hard job, something like sitting with shame for a whole week, and deciding and choosing better to protect the family and the children. And I do see this an attempt as an attack for the nuclear family and the self-worth of man and the self-worth of women. Now it's transactional. Now is we can expose our bodies and we can something that was so sacred or used to be so sacred, like intimacy and connection, now have become a avenue to discharge or to distract ourselves. Which another avenue that is quite popular is alcohol. And I would love to know this habit that you had about drinking alcohol and this addiction. How much alcohol were you drinking?
It depends on the time in my life. I used alcohol in college to pretty much abuse myself for all the things that I had done to people, because I thought that I unconsciously believed that I needed to abuse myself. So, it was, 20, 30 beers, like in the sitting in college, going to a big party school, being in a fraternity. That's just what we did. Going into chiropractic school, we partied similar, yet my tolerance was lower. I was getting older. So but I would still black out, couldn't tell you the amount, 9, 10, something like that. And then, getting into practice and, starting my life outside of school, I would use it as a hangout type of thing, very social. And I was always I don't have a problem. But then, it'd be 5, 6 beers later, I'm walking home because my wife left me. She's you're drunk, figure your shit out, and I'm glad she would do that. Right. And I'm fuck yeah. Now that I'm looking back at it, I'm good for her, man. So,
Yeah.
so I was like, right?
I was saying, she's my type.
She is, yeah. She's from here. Yeah, she doesn't take any shit. And so
I love it.
she's a big catalyst for me in my life. And so, it was around then that I started to have like some bodily symptoms, some things coming up, and I was like, okay, I have to just deduct from my life. So it was a lot, a lot all the time. Kept it in the house. Everything was an excuse to drink. I'm going to go work in the wood shop. I'm going to go drink. I'm going to go sit by a fire. I'm going to go drink. I'm going to go for a drive. I'm going to go drink. It's like whatever I could utilize as an attribute to my own psychosis, I would do that.
Yeah. And you said something, you mentioned there that I'm really curious about. You mentioned the phrase, the things that I did to people during my younger age. Can I ask a little bit further into detail? What do you mean by that?
Sure. Just like via my own relationships, I, like stepping out on girlfriends or like just being like a schemer. I was a schemer to people. I would be like a detached manipulator. I would manipulate people to get what I wanted in those relationships when I was, 17, 18 into my early 20s. And it was always centered around like women or like friends of mine or some sort of nature to be good with my words, to be very narcissistic with my words and manipulate a situation to get what I wanted. So that was like the big theme around that. So I would, I wasn't knowing that I was consciously punishing myself, but now that I look back, I'm like, man, like I spent like a lot of years in what they call like catabasis, which is like your ashes work, like doing a lot of the dealing with my shame and guilt and all of that. So that was a big, 4 to 8 years of my life.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I have another question now that you're openly talking about this. We did touch upon repressed anger, and somebody that knows anger like that is because he probably has felt, or he probably repressed it for a long time, somebody that knows anger that well. And I want to know whether at some point in your life and your development, you were violent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
May I ask in which ways?
Well, ways in towards, never towards women, always more so breaking things, or like when I was little, I would like break my toys. I would like literally break my own things because I was just so angry because I could not understand what I was feeling. Towards that, I would always just like blow up. If I had enough of something, I would blow up and leave the situation, or and not really self-harm in that way, not suicidal. More so always just like self-destructive. Like I was a ticking time bomb waiting to just blow up on someone or something, punching walls or hitting cars or breaking phones. Or so it was all like the toy thing went later into other little aspects of physical objects, and funny enough, my last relationship before this, it was extremely abusive, and yet she was hitting me. I would let her hit me. See how it all like comes full circle around. She would hit me, she would scratch me, she would do all these things because I felt that I deserved it, and one day I said, no more. I said, I'm done. You're not going to abuse me like this. And I placed a boundary there, and she never crossed that boundary again. And I did it in a way of like aggressive, not in a sense of striking, in a sense of like, I'm not taking this anymore. And so all that played out, which was very liberating for me because I finally used my anger to place a boundary that was finally respected. So that's why I talk about it so much, because it's, I've got a lot of experience there of, maluse versus useful use.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it's all,
that's, a treasure, I would say. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Also good.
But it truly is I have a quick question about whether you as a child felt like your surroundings, your upbringing was shaming you, let's say teachers, you were the bad kid in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you think that played a role
Absolutely.
into this big emotions that you were feeling that you couldn't explain?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We can see now how every little thing is connected. I'm the bad kid for having these big emotions that I cannot say or do. So I break things. The cycle continues. Then I am shamed upon. Then I need to hide myself. If I need to hide myself, then I need to feed into anything that I can get to have emotion or have any distraction. Pornography, gambling, it gives you that spike. And then the cycle continues. You did something that is not good for you, that puts you into zero balance, and then you deserve to be punished, or you deserved. And it's incredibly insightful to know that punishment might not be the way for somebody that has such big emotions. What would you think that would be the way for that little you, 5-year-old little you? What do you think that he needed? Rather than feeling or making felt ashamed?
At 5, let's go to 7. I think 5 was pretty great for me. Let's go around. I think just the ability to express himself and be loved in that expression. To feel safe in that, because this pattern that I'm talking about, a lot of that stemmed from all of my let's call it all of the civilized things, all of the social constructive things that you're supposed to do, go to school, private school, do all this stuff. And I found the most safety in my life around skateboarding and that culture and that community. Because that's when I was able to express myself. And I found a lot of other kids, because in the 90s, the scene of skateboarding was a lot of, all kids came from some sort of aspect of a broken home, some sort of aspect of trauma, and we all bonded together, and we just had this beautiful experience that I still have friends that I talk to today that I've known for, over 25 years, because we bonded around this way of display, of expression. And I got that in that way, right? So for my parents, what I said, from that, just the ability to be trusted in my knowing and what I was feeling, and not to sacrifice my own knowing and feeling for the sake of a bigger mood, which was theirs, to belittle my experience.
To belittle your experience. If you were to have a kid in the position you were in when you were 7, let's place an example. He comes home because he's very, very angry. Somebody was mean to him at the recess, and he was very mean to him, and he hit him. So he was reported, and now they have to go into the principal's office. What would you do in a situation like that, where the most simple kind of avenue is to punish the kid that was hit?
So you're saying my son was, I'm going to say son, my son was hit, or my son hit?
Your son hit.
Oh, your son. Okay, he's a hitter. I would first ask him, is this kid a bully? And depending upon that answer, I would ask, well, what do you need to hit? What do you need to destroy? How are you feeling? I would give him something to use. Give him a pillow, give him a bat, say, hey, go utilize this here, and then we'll talk. Because there has to be a space for that to go somewhere. He's got to understand that he can use that in a controlled sense. Instead of oh, you're going to get it at home, I don't have a son yet, though. I have a daughter. And so that's a journey within itself, as I'm gifted with raising a woman, you know. So
Beautiful.
but that's where I would go.
Yes. And I know you do beautiful work with other men. So I would love for you to explain a little about, okay, what is it that you do? I know you do retreats, but what activities do you do in those retreats? I especially with men, I think it's so, like, women, we talk about emotions in the bathroom, you know, of a restaurant. But I know, it's like, oh, yeah, he's outside. I'm so excited. We're on a date, you know, and that's normal for us. That's another Tuesday for us. But I know for men that it must be quite challenging to come to such a vulnerable space where you're fully seen. How do you even start?
Well, a lot of my work is remote. So I work with men, and I'll call them containers, on getting to the root of why they have started watching pornography. And I look at it from the lens of the body and the mind and the spirit. And so I feel like I'm able to cultivate such a safe space because of how vulnerable that I am, and how I talk about my experience a lot, and how I have this ability to be able to see patterns and simplify it and mirror it back to them and let them understand in a really non-judgmental, safe way. So all that is my like remote stuff. And then that transitions to being in person, where all that gets culminated and transmuted because we've done all of the back end inventory, where we're just sitting with simply each other, and it's their time and space to be seen. So what it is that we do, well, I like to talk about things in the form of metaphors. So with my work that I do with myself, and then another coaching community I'm a part of called The Collective, are you familiar with the work of The Hero's Journey? Are you familiar with that?
No.
I'm spacing on the guy's name at the moment. So we in the essence, we take them into, and I take them into their own cave, all the things that they've been hiding from. And we take them into their cave. We obtain the treasure from their wounding, right? Every man has a wound. We take the treasure, and then we take it out of the cave, and they share it with the world. So they share their gifts with the world that come from the wounding that puts you in touch with your father and your father's wounding. So that's in a metaphor sense. That's what I do. And I've had the honor and pleasure to work with over 20 men in the past year, that I've learned so much about men, and I learn more and more every day. And simply, it's about being able to stand true to your boundaries that you place. And it's about understanding and seeing the role of technology and what it plays, and your past, and how you want to utilize all of that for yourself and finding liberation.
What is the one thing in common that you see that all of these men have? Is there something that you say, this is what I see most often? Yeah.
All 20, the pattern starts from fear. It doesn't start from shame. It starts from fear. So they have some sort of, let me give you context. They have some sort of, something happens in their environment, in their field, and they become afraid. Whether it's like, oh, I check my bank account and I'm so freaking poor and I want this life. So then I'm going to go to Instagram and desire someone's life. Then I come across something there that makes me feel, happy, pleasureful, angry, or horny. I view angry and horny as the same, because in anger, you can either destroy an old pattern, or you can act upon this horny nature and destroy yourself. Mm-hmm. And so it all starts from fear, traverses through that pattern, you go to pride, like, oh, I'll stop tomorrow, it's all good. And then you meet like the space of neutrality, where you can either go left and go back to the old ways, or you can go right and become willing to embrace your life without porn. And then they will go to watching porn, and then that will go to shame. So it always starts from fear of being rejected, fear of death, fear of commitment, fear of abandonment, some sort of aspect of fear.
What would you tell a person that does not know who he is without all of his addictions?
I would ask him, who is he with it? How is it serving you? What's right about your addiction?
Yes, even
instead of looking at it, instead of looking at it like there's something wrong, because if you're like, what's wrong with you, then they're just going to get more of what they've already gotten in the first place, which is shame. But it's like, well, like, how is this serving you? You're like, well, it's not. That's what everyone will say. And I'm like, well, if it wasn't serving you, you wouldn't be doing it. So what is it giving you that you're not getting in real life? And then they'll go, okay, makes me feel good. I'm like, yeah, it does, right? It does. Makes me feel powerful. Yeah. Makes me feel in control. Absolutely. So then they start to unpack that, and then we just keep going down that trail till we reach complete, and then we go the other way. We got to work our way up.
Well, I think we can get the yeast of this cycle that comes from shame, comes from feeling misunderstood, comes from not making space for children that have big emotions and experience things in a big way, not giving space for those emotions and shame them for having them. And then later on, of course, feeding into that shame with other things. And all of this is a pattern that we can summarize as addiction, but I need to thank you profoundly for having talked so openly about it. It's the first time I have ever come across about somebody that is willingly to share something as openly. So I cannot be anything but grateful to you. And to finish off the conversation, I would love for you to tell the people that might have felt that it resonated with them, that perhaps they find themselves in a spot where they're ashamed, they are, minus 45 in their bank account, and they where do they start? Where do they find you? Even listening to your voice, to your advice, where could they find you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I'm active on Instagram. That's where I do all my work. So you can find me on there, DM me, or I've got my link there where you can fill out my form there, and I'll get back to you and we'll set up a call. So that's my basis of communication there.
What is your Instagram? If you can.
It's Mitchell Lee Ma. So it's my full name, Mitchell, another L, E, and then M-A, Ma.
We'll place it at the description of this episode, just so that they have that. But thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all the best in the rest of your endeavors.
Thank you so much.